أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. Respected brothers, sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's always a great pleasure. It's always a great pleasure, alhamdulillah, to be here with you. And my heart is always attached, alhamdulillah, to this masjid. Just a few points, inshallah. Brothers, also remember that you are part of a community in the UK. There are many, many brothers around the UK, alhamdulillah, who are upon our manhaj and upon our way. And you should not forget our brothers and should make ta'awan ala al-birra wa taqwa. Cooperate with them, inshallah, upon goodness and righteousness as much as possible. Sometimes, you know, people become a bit insular. Or we live in Birmingham and we live in Bradford and Fulham. No. So inshallah, remember the akhuwa, the brotherhood, inshallah, and try to, like I said, you know, link up with your brothers and your community, inshallah, across the country, because we are being attacked. This is the reality. We are really being attacked. This ISIS crisis, this is a very, you know, some people will say, oh, it's not really a crisis. This is not really a crisis affecting the Muslims. You know, really, this is something which is being over-exaggerated. This is being something which is being done to deflect away from the real problems, which is foreign policy of the US and the UK in the Muslim world and things like this. So you know, the reality of the matter is this is a crisis, and I'll explain why. This is a subject I've actually been studying for the last 10 years, and I'm going to share some of this. I know you've looked at the theological aspects in the last 2 lectures on the Khawarij and the Neo-Khawarijites, of which if there was ever a group today that had all of the characteristics of the Khwarij, it would be ISIS. And in fact, I don't even like using the term Islamic State because they are an un-Islamic state. In fact, I had an interview with the BBC and I made it very clear to them. I said, why is it that you keep on calling them the Islamic State? This is a group that has hijacked the kalima, hijacked the seal of the Prophet ﷺ on its banner, hijacked so many of the symbols of Islam for their own wicked and evil purpose. You not only, you know, and we find that the mainstream media agencies give free publicity to these ghulat, these extremists. You know, you might remember a couple of months ago, some boys from Cardiff, and I went and spoke to the university there, to the other brothers in the Isis Society. Tell me what these boys were like. Tell me why they were influenced by this particular group. You might remember this particular video. It was on every single front page. Even still they used the image. And it was on every single media outlet. And so I said to the BBC, I said, why are you giving free publicity to a murderous, psychotic organization that is doing nothing but kill indiscriminately? Why are you giving free publicity? Because if you look at the video, and this is really why this is a crisis, the whole issue on ISIS is about the fact that there is a propaganda war going on. You know, some of the scholars, Sheikh Ibn Baz rahimahullah, he called it Ghazwat al-Fikri, the ideological attack. And this is really one of the challenges. The big game changer that we have at the moment is this. That unfortunately we are not using social media to message the appropriate message to our shabab. And that the people who are reaching them at the moment are reaching them in a disaffected state, disempowered state, confused not just about their own purpose and direction, but about the basics of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a result of them, they are able to channel them, manipulate them, and put them into their own direction. And unless we engage our youth in an effective messaging strategy, we reach them with the correct message of Islam, then we are losing the battle. And we cannot afford to lose this battle because we have been charged with this responsibility. If I go on to some of the principles, the Prophet ﷺ told us in every age there will be a group like Al-Khawarij. They call them the dogs of the hellfire, Kalb an-Nar. Part of them being dogs of the hellfire, they fit this description because they bark. And they bark a lot, and and most people are intimidated by the bark. And again, this is why, this has been a bit of a crisis. Not only have we had this propaganda war, and ISIS is extremely slick, extremely sophisticated in its messaging and its use of multiple social media platforms to get its message across. As I said, they even got their message across to millions of people through the BBC. And the video itself is a brilliant video, I have to say, just on production values. The message itself is nothing but wickedness and evil. But the production values are excellent. The soft filter that was used, the backdrop, the three young brothers there, and the camaraderie and the love and the brotherhood between themselves. The message, interspersing it with the verses of the Quran which give emotional impact. It's very powerful and very compelling and very persuasive to a disaffected mindset. So I said to the BBC, why are you giving them free publicity? And I even said, I even told them, stop using the term Islamic State, because when you use this term amongst the confused, young mindset out there, it gives them a stamp of approval and validation. We call them al-Khawarij and neo-Khwaraijites, because their characteristics are exactly as the Prophet ﷺ has described them then. They are the same people. For example, one simple thing. Do we see amongst them any ulama and fuqaha? Any people who have ijazah in the fiqh of jihad? Do we see anyone? Do we see even from their remote supporters, people who are, the scholars of the land and the Amir of Dawlah, the people who are in charge of the land, and the people who have this position of being ulil amr, of authority in the land, both in terms of ilm or in the kind of political sense? No. So we don't see a single scholar amongst them. Rather, the scholars that they aspire to, and one of them who has deceived the youth. And when I say this, actually a lot of people don't like me saying this thing. And this is another one of the reasons we have a crisis. Because many of the du'at, and I'm going to make myself unpopular, but this is not about me being popular or not, this is about the truth. And by all means, challenge me on it. Many of the du'at here in the UK have remained completely quiet on the subject of ISIS and have not called them for what they are. And they have massive following amongst the youth. So when the so-called du'at, and I have to say this, is that, and I had one individual come up to me and say, when I said publicly, I called them a psychotic death cult, and I called them what they are, the dogs of the hellfire. And he said to me, don't say this, because you're going to alienate yourself a bit. I said, look, if we all keep quiet on it and none of us say it and call them for what they are Khwarij. If we don't say this, then the youth will be confused. And you are actually pushing the youth towards them. And a lot of people have remained silent. Just to give you an idea, how many masajid across here in the UK? Over 1,000. How many of the masajid across the UK have had a lecture or a series of lectures like this that have explained how ISIS are a Khawariji, neo-Khawarijite group? How many have done that? And we're not just doing this, as I'll show you. I'll bring you facts, principles, evidence to actually support our argument. This is not just a, as one brother told me, your government paid, that's why you're making this statement and things like this. No. We say this because the Prophet ﷺ, the people who follow the manhaj of the Salaf Salih, it's important. Because we've allowed the term Salafi also to become hijacked by Salaf media and this ilk of people who have no resemblance to the Salaf Salih and the manhaj of the Salaf Salih. Because we ask, where are your scholars? And where are the people of ijazah? And where are the people of teaching? And where are the people who are embedded in knowledge and qualified to give fatwa amongst you? And they only bring Bakr Muhammad. And they have no scholar or teacher amongst them. Yet they ascribe to themselves the term Salaf. And we've allowed them to hijack this term. And we've allowed the term Salafi to become maligned. When the Salaf and the people who follow the way of Ahl Sunnah are the foremost in challenging the Khawarij in every age. Because our responsibility is to protect the integrity of the Sunnah and the integrity of the institutions of Islam. And jihad is one of those institutions. We believe in jihad. But we believe in jihad upon the manhaj of the Prophet ﷺ, based upon principles and governance derived from scholars and people of knowledge, not from children. Because Allah says in the Quran, simple principle, فَاسْأَلُوا أَحْلَ ذِكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. But the social media age is such that people don't ask people of knowledge. They ask people of desires, of emotion, or passionate speech. They ask people of dreams. They ask people of slogans. They ask people with their own political agenda. They're not asking people of knowledge. In fact, and this is the crisis really amongst the shabab. If I give you a simple framework, and this is like I said, I'll be sharing some of the research that I've been doing over the many hundreds of cases that I've reviewed of people who have been, and I use the term radicalized. I'll explain what it means in a minute here. For our point of view, it means people who have been influenced by the Dar al-Harb ideology, the ideology which indicates that this is a land of war, therefore I am a combatant here, and because of that I should be fighting the kuffar, and anyone who doesn't agree with me, I will make takfir of them, because essentially the manhaj of al-Khawarij is the manhaj of takfir, of declaring Muslims out of the fold of Islam, thereby making their blood, their property halal for yourselves, and they believe by mass killing. And this is no different to many other groups I'll explain, which are, what we call Stalinist in their methodology. That is basically, if you want to promote your ideology, you eradicate, kill everyone who opposes it, and then therefore you're able to maintain your kind of objective. So these groups which exist today, what we find out, the many masajid that are here in the UK, how many are speaking against this? How many of the du'at have called them for what they are? Even after the killing of Alan Henning, this man from Manchester who went there for humanitarian purposes. And again, just a side point on this. I met with the brothers, one of the brothers involved in this charity just yesterday, and I said to him, you did a bad thing by taking Alan Henning into Syria. Where was your risk assessment? And this is what happens when amateurs who have no knowledge of the balad, of the land, no language of the land, no contacts, no handlers, no networks there, no understanding of how to operate there, and have a good intention. And the intention is a good, we want to go and give charity. Alhamdulillah, it's a good intention. But you have to have the qudra, the capability to do this. And this was an incompetent group of people. I will say it as it is. And they have blood on their hands. Because they took a non-Muslim into a hostile conflict situation where kidnappings were taking place. And he was kidnapped within, like I said, less than an hour. Now, again, this is the emotion. This is the emotional response when people abandon people of knowledge who are advising them, who have many, many years and years of experience, and rather they go with their emotion. But going back onto this tragic event of the killing of Alan Henning, what we had was that, as we know, this was a person under the Aman, the security of the Muslims there. He was going there to do humanitarian act. And you find lots of people then came out and started to make statements of condemnation. Although they didn't condemn ISIS, what they did is they condemned the act. I still believe they sit on the fence on the issue. And part of the reason they sit on the fence on the issue is because the choice really is a difficult choice. And the way that ISIS put it, if you don't support us, you are supporting the US and the UK. No, there is a middle choice. We are upon the wasat. We support the sunnah. We support the correct understanding from the sharia. That's what we stand up. That is what we qa'iman bil qist, when you stand up for justice and that which is firm. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةٌ وَسَطًا. We are upon the wasat on this matter. We don't pander to the US and UK foreign policy or governmental policy or prevent agenda, nor do we agree with the ghulat. We take the balanced position based upon knowledge, understanding and wisdom. This is our position. So just going back onto the killing of Alan Henning, this was obviously clearly a crime. And it indicates and it shows ISIS for what they are. Because this is the same kidnapping tactics which is used by Tahrik Taliban, by Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab. That they kidnap individuals and they ask for ransoms. And when the ransom is not paid, well, what do? They have to execute the individual. Is this the act of an Islamic organization or a criminal organization? You see, when many, many Islamic authorities then told ISIS, your act is wrong. This is completely against the Sharia. And they brought many proofs to show this. Then ISIS and their leaders who claim to be upon the Sunnah should have recognized this and should have let Alan Henning go. They should have done that. Or they should have said, yes, you are right and we will. But rather, na'uzubillah, they executed him. Why? Very simply this. Because if they start letting people go and showing mercy, raham upon them, then they're not able to collect their ransoms anymore. And interestingly, the European hostages from France and Italy have been released. We don't know why. Maybe people paid the ransom. But the US and the UK ones were not released. because they have a policy which is very strict on not paying ransoms. And this goes back now to a theological principle. And it comes back to the very origins of Al-Khawarij, with the first event, with Dhul Khuwaisra, when he came to the Prophet ﷺ. And you might relate, I'm sure the previous speakers have explained this, but I just want to make the link here. That when Dhul Khuwaisra came to the Prophet, it was an after event when the Prophet ﷺ had received gold. And this gold then he distributed amongst the companions. And the Prophet ﷺ chose to distribute it as he will to those companions who were worthy of this. Dhul Khuwaisra, on seeing this, he came to the Prophet ﷺ. He said, O Messenger of Allah ﷺ, be just, because you have not been just. Na'uzubillah. The one who had the most taqwa and the one who had the most justice and had revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you had a human, you had Dhul Khuwaisra challenging the authority of the Prophet ﷺ, and really what he's saying is that I am more just than you and I am better than you. And this is the Khawariji mentality now, this kind of ultra extreme nature of them. And then, as we know, okay, it is Khalid ibn Walid, he said, let me bring his head. And the Prophet ﷺ declined. He says, don't bring his head, because then they will say that Muhammad ﷺ kills his companions. So he looked, he surveyed, he examined the situation and what was the greatest maslahah, so they let him go. But he said, as we know that hadith, he said, from them will come a people, they will recite the Quran, it will not pass their lips, and they will go quicker out of Islam than the arrow goes through the game, such that the hunter will examine the arrow and find no trace of the animal even on the arrow. That's how quickly it's gone through. At this point, they recite the Quran, it doesn't pass their lips. And this is a fundamental weakness in terms of their ilm. They were not amongst the people to whom the knowledge of the Quran was revealed. And this again is one of the things we see amongst the Shabab. If we look at their level of Islamic understanding, and we say that we try to classify the understanding to what's called primary school, high school, college, university, postgraduate. This is a kind of a classification that most of us are familiar with. And when we look at the Shabab today, and this is no criticism of them, this is just the reality of where they're at. Most of our Shabab, in terms of their theological understanding, the matters of Aqidah and of Manhaj, and the general understanding of the fiqh of the Kitab and the Sunnah, we will really say that they are a primary school to high school level. That's a reality of the majority of them. When it comes to the specialist matters, such as the matters of hakimiyya, of rulership and judgment, and it comes to specialist matters such as the fiqh of jihad, what we can really say is that they're at primary school, if that. Because the fiqh of jihad is a specialist area of fiqh. It's not just something which we just pull out, and even Awlaki was not qualified in the fiqh of jihad. In fact, Awlaki had no ijazah. He had ijazah in a matter of some of the lesser books on fiqh, but he had no specialism in terms of the fiqh of jihad. But however, with the Inspire magazine, he was out there and giving fatwa, and of these fatwas were, and this fatwa shows complete disregard for the consequence of the action. Just as ISIS have issued this fatwa as well. They said to the Muslims here in the UK, you must go and kill the non-Muslims here, any target. Okay, some say anyone and everyone just to cause chaos and confusion, but others say strategic targets and things like that. Of course, this is haram, completely unacceptable, completely against our ahd wal aman, our contract of security of living in this country. But this fatwa, not only does it show a complete lack of awareness of the Muslim situation here, a desire to cause fitna, but it also shows a complete disregard for human life and also the life of Muslims. Because as we know, when there is an incident here in the UK, then there is a blowback upon the Muslim community. Our mosques are targeted, our sisters are targeted, okay, and we have racist attacks and worse things happening here. So again, it shows a complete lack of understanding in terms of the fiqh of jihad. So we go to our Shabab and we look, and this is the crisis really. The biggest issue of our Shabab is their basic lack of understanding of the knowledge of the religion, and so therefore, because they're at a primary school level of understanding, then anyone who comes to them with an emotional, compelling story, especially now that we're already in a disaffected mindset, living here in the UK, and I'll explain these kind of issues a bit later on, then you find it's very easy to recruit, very easy to kind of like influence this particular, and then when you put the backdrop of what is happening in the Muslim world, which is completely unacceptable and reprehensible. It's unacceptable. The level, since the war on terror, 2 million people have died, have been killed in the Muslim world. And the number of Muslim countries that have been totally destroyed, which means our shabab for the last 13 years have had nothing but a daily diet, I call it, of death and destruction. So they're already angry. And I can see the anger is completely legitimate. It's not enough sometimes to say sabr. People want to do something. And this is where the failure now comes of the masajids and I think the mainstream Muslim community, that we have not provided a framework for young people, for our shabab, to engage in this discussion, even talk about these issues. Even in masjids where I go now, and we're talking about now different denominations, we might be more forward thinking on this issue. But many of the other masajid, the Deobandi masajid, the Barelvi masajid, all of the other denominations out there, they don't even touch this issue. And that's why their young people are easy pickings. In fact, some of the young brothers, they come up to me, even still, after they say, we want to talk to you because we understand you talk about J. They want to talk to me about J. Because they can't even use the term jihad because they're scared of using the term jihad. Now, when we don't talk to our youth about this very important thing of jihad and give them the correct understanding from the sunnah and the correct instruction on this particular matter, as well as the matter of how to live here in the UK as a Muslim, although we are a minority, we don't give them this instruction and guidance. And most of the masajid are not, and most of the imams out there, unfortunately, are not giving them this instruction and guidance. Where do they go for this guidance? They go straight onto the internet. We call it Sheikh Google, as people know. And they look actively guidance on the internet. And when you go to a space which is ungoverned, uncontrolled, hidden, then you don't know who your instructor, who your handler, who your guide is, who your teacher is. And if you're already in this primary school level of understanding, then it's very easy to convince and very easy to get your propaganda over their propaganda. And so the other thing about this crisis, like many of the crises which hit the Muslim community here in the UK, most of us are caught napping. Most of us are sleeping. Some of us saw this coming down the line, but our organizations were not geared up. And so one of the lessons we need to take about in relation to the shabab and how they're influenced by this global propaganda that's taking place is that we need to be more proactive. We need to be thinking now 10 years ahead, what's coming down the line in terms of this fitan. And let me tell you, in my experience, the 5 big challenges that we have. This talk isn't just about ISIS. This talk is also about the challenge of our shabab and our youth. We have a 4th generation of British-born Muslims here in the UK who still feel confused about their identity, don't know how to integrate with this society, feel excluded, all of these particular issues. But the 5 big issues that are affecting them. First, mental health, emotional well-being issues. Number 2, addiction. Number 3, criminality and violence. Number 4, sexual abuse. And number 5, extremism and violence. And actually extremist violence is actually the least of those big risks. These are 5 big issues that are affecting our young people. As with many of these issues, we are caught napping. We are not putting in the foundations that are required to deal with these challenges. And if we don't, we lose generations. We don't just lose one generation, we lose many generations. I want to go back to that story of Dhul Khuwaisra. When he challenged the Prophet ﷺ, he told the Prophet ﷺ to fear Allah, you are unjust, na'udzu billah. And he was saying that he was better than the Prophet ﷺ. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, again, one of the things he said, don't be fooled by the outward appearance of the al-Khawarij. In fact, in the other hadith of Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, he described that there will be people who look like us and speak like us and worship like us, but they will be callers to the hellfire. So if they look like us, speak like us, use the same language, the same principles, everything as us, how will we differentiate? And part of this is the important need to be able to differentiate. Because if we can't take this fitan, how are we going to deal with the real fitan of Dajjal and the lesser Dajjals that are going to come? If we're so easily manipulated by social media and people who appear, like I said, they look like us. Abu Bakr Baghdadi, he looks like us, he dresses like us, he uses the same khutbatul hajjah as us, everything. But the Prophet said, don't be fooled by their worship. Don't be fooled. Now, going back onto this story, what was the grievance of Al-Khawarij? What was their real grievance? Was it that they believed that the Prophet had been unjust? Or was it the fact that the Prophet ﷺ did not give them the gold, the money? And fundamentally, the Khawarij manipulate the situation for their own materialistic gain. This is why you'll see the characteristics of every Khawariji group after that is that they are primarily motivated by power, money, and fame. And Dhul Khuwaisara made himself famous by abusing the Prophet ﷺ in this way. They wanted the gold, they wanted the money. And that's why today the Khwarijite groups are nothing other than criminal organizations. Like I said, if they were concerned about following the Sunnah, they would have let Alan Henning go. But because they wanted the ransom, then they executed him when the ransom wasn't paid. In the same way, today someone told me this, they've advertised, ISIS have put an advert out for a petrochemical engineer, £140,000 per year, apparently it pays, so they're paying very well. Okay, why? Because they, as we know, they have, like I said, hijacked all of these oil fields in the Mosul region, and they chose Mosul in itself. Why did they choose Mosul? They chose Mosul even though, you know, this is a place where, you know, there are Muslims, there are Sunni Muslims already there. But because of its link with, obviously, the oil fields and the pipelines which distribute the oil out of northern Iraq to Israel and to other places. Now, one of the things about ISIS is that the reason that they're able to pay mercenaries from all over the world to come and fight there is because they have at their disposal billions of dollars. They are a very wealthy organization. Now, if they had Islamic objectives, then and one of the descriptions of Imam Mahdi is this, that when he comes, he will give away money freely in terms of sadaqah, in terms of making sure those people who are masakin and fuqara benefit from their wealth. That's a description of Imam Mahdi. So Abu Bakr claims to be Khalifa and has millions, if not billions, at his disposal. Where do we see the free distribution of this money to the whole of the Ummah? But rather we see the containment of the money themselves, because this is an organization driven by materialistic objectives. They are nothing other than hijacking Islam and using Islam for their own criminal endeavor. Then I'm going to talk about some other aspects of it as well. Now, another thing I want you to kind of think about, and this is an interesting kind of parallel that people don't see as well, that ISIS and other, you could say, extreme Islamist organizations like this, and the term Islamist basically means that they're using Islam as a political ideology to achieve their political objective. For us, as we know, udkhulu fi silmi kafa, enter into Islam completely. Islam is a complete and total way of life for ourselves. You know, we don't just compartmentalize, use it as a political ideology or a spiritual methodology. No, we accept the whole reality of Islam. One of the interesting parallels between ISIS is ISIS in its methodology adopts the Zionist methodology. If you want to get some kind of understanding of this, go into the Natura Kartai website. Natura Kartai, for those of you know, are the Orthodox Jews against the State of Israel. You've probably seen them at demonstrations. You know, the Gaza and the Palestine demonstrations. You see the Orthodox Jewish community attending, showing solidarity with the Palestinian people. And these are Orthodox Jews who believe that in the Torah, in their theology, that it is impermissible for the Jewish nation to have a state. So they obey their revelation. And they believe Zionism, and we also have to make this distinction. Judaism and Zionism are completely separate ideologies. Zionism is a secular ideology, secular political ideology, whereas Judaism is a religion. Now, coming on to Zionism, for example, many Zionists themselves are secular, and some of them don't even believe, are atheists as well. Now, with regards to this secular materialistic ideology, the Natura Kartai says that Zionism contradicts the fundamental principles of Judaism. You could say it is the Khawariji equivalent in Judaism. And I don't want to complicate this too much, but there are two principles around Zionism. First is the belief in nation state, that you have to establish this nation state, and secondary, that you establish it and maintain it through a military solution. That's Zionism. Militarism and national statehood. And when we see the methodology of these kinds of equivalent groups in the Muslim, they believe in establishment of a nation state, not upon the manhaj of the Sunnah, not upon the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ, but really through a military method. And we see it, the maintenance of that state through military intervention. And then, just as with Zionism, they believe in the ethnic cleansing and the eradication of all people who oppose that ideology. And we see the same equivalent with regards to the neo-Khawarijites, that they ethnically cleanse and they remove anyone through takfir who oppose their methodology. So this is an interesting parallel that maybe some people haven't seen, the direct parallel between, ISIS and Zionist methodology. Anyway, I want to move back onto the issue of the ISIS crisis. You see, one of the pieces of research that I've done, and this lecture might go on all night, so I don't want to burden the people too much, is that, as I said, I spent a long time analysing many of the cases of individuals, young people who have been involved in incidents and have gone to fight abroad and things like this. And I developed what I call a framework of what the things that influenced them and how they were groomed, because this is very amazing. I'm talking about the shabab here, I'm not talking about the older people. The young people are often, one of the things are often idealistic, naive. They lack, as I said, knowledge and understanding of the religion. They have a very abstract notion. You could say almost their notion isn't believed, that they don't have the wisdom in terms of what it means in terms of practical abstract. They believe in a romanticized notion of jihad. You could say their notion around jihad is very much based on, you could say, like I said, video game type of mentality. So this highly idealistic, highly impressionable, naive individual, anyone can come to this individual and you can easily convince by, like I said, dressing in a certain way, reciting particular ayat. Now look at this. وَلَا تَكُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٍ بَلْ أَحْيَاءً وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. It's a very emotive ayat. Where Allah Ta'ala, He says that, and do not say that those who are killed in the way of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala are dead. No, they are alive, but you do not know. It's very emotive. It's very easy to convince someone with one ayat like this, that you are a scholar, that you are someone who, and if you add a story to it, a compelling story, that idealistic, that naive, that romanticized. Why are they not dead? Because they are their souls are in the stomachs of green birds that are flying around in paradise. And this can be you. If you are a person who obviously gives bay'ah to the Amir and puts yourself in the front line. It's interesting, they always put the young, naive, idealistic mindset in the front line as cannon fodder, whereas they're always behind and their sons are not there in the front line. So this is another one of the hypocrisy that we see amongst these particular groups. So what I've done is identified all these factors, and I identified 5 what I call core factors and 66 sub-factors. I'm not going to go through all of them tonight, but I'm going to start giving you an idea of the vulnerabilities that are out for youth. Now, why these vulnerabilities are important to recognize is because we have to protect our shabab. Protect our shabab in a couple of ways. First, obviously, we don't want them to have the Dar al-Harb neo-Khwarijite ideology, because if they do, they are destroying their a'mal. Just to give you a simple example, I just did an expert witness report for a defense of 2 young boys who were at the Old Bailey for a terrorism trial under Section 58, and I'll explain the sections in a minute, it's why it's important. These were 2 guys, 17 and 18, they were preyed upon. The individual who was preying upon them and manipulating, the first thing he got them to do, the initiation, and he did this within the Dar al-Harb, he got them to do credit card fraud. He found them the credit card numbers, he said, now go out and do the fraud. It's an initiation process to see how far you can take this individual. These boys who have never stolen before, never committed, good boys, started committing credit card fraud. And it starts to already, what it does is it criminalizes you. The person starts having leverage and control over you and can start manipulating you even further. But what was the rationale? The Dar al-Harb rationale. And for those people who know, the Dar al-Harb land of war methodology has been around for 20 years, 30 years here in the UK. Some of the people who have been promoting this idea were directly responsible. The 7/7 bombers were influenced by people who have this particular ideology. Now, with regards to credit card fraud, what's the rationale? We said we are jacking the system. You are bringing down the capitalist system. And by undermining the capitalist system, then obviously you are going to be supporting and bringing the izzah of Islam. This is the reason why. But so what they're doing is, and I know one brother who made thousands and thousands, and then he made tawbah obviously for the evil that he did. He would have all the latest designer clothes, and doing all kinds of credit card fraud, catalog fraud, all kinds of fraud to gain this money. As I said, when it goes back to al-Khawarij, in terms of the motivation, it starts off with materialism, power, money and fame, to have these things, rather than for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, so we don't want our youth to go down this particular line as well, but also I'll give you the seriousness of this situation. We had a boy in Bradford, and brother said, come and talk to him. So I came to talk to him. He wanted to go off to Syria and go and fight. And so I explained to him all the fiqh of jihad, how it was impermissible for him. Not only that, at that time, the legitimate resistance in Syria, Ahrar al-Sham, Jabhat al-Islamiyya and the Free Syrian Army, this is the Syrian legitimate resistance. They said, we do not want any foreign fighters. Now, from the first principle, one of the first principles around jihad al-Nusra, the jihad of going and insisting on other people, is that you have to be invited by the Emir of Dawla. You can't just turn up there. You have to, because the other requirements are qudra, that they have to have some kind of infrastructure and capability. If the Emir of Dawla is saying, don't come, then we don't go. And this is following the Sunnah. And that's why the only group, even Jabhat al-Nusra was under that particular instruction as well. The only group that defied that and was taking foreign fighters was ISIS. And as we know, and I don't know if this was made clear in the lectures, the evidence is absolutely crystal clear now, this. And one of them is, why is ISIS at the moment fighting in Kobane in the northern border with Syria and Turkey? Why is it fighting Kurds there when Bashar al-Assad is the other way? Why is it doing that? Because as is clear, is that they are fighting the resistance rather than fighting against Assad. Anyway, that's going to come back on to that in a minute. But going back, so this young boy, we explained to him all the principles. It was impermissible for him to go. He can't even speak Arabic. So as you're going to go there and you can't even speak Arabic. Are you trained? No, he didn't fulfill any of the conditions or requirement, and it was impermissible. On top of that, as we know, we have a contract of security, Ahad wal Aman, and this is not permissible for us to break this contract here in the UK. Now, alhamdulillah, the young brother, he listened to us for a good year, and he was fine. And we involved him in other activities, because this is the key thing here now for our youth. You have to engage them in some kind of activity. So we involved him in some charitable work, and he felt that he was doing this charitable work, alhamdulillah, he felt he was doing something for the Syrian people. Like I said, it's not enough just to say, oh, just be quiet. You've got to provide an alternative for our youth, so that they feel that they're involved in legitimate activism, something legitimate to help the people of Syria. And so I told the brothers, keep an eye on him. And they kept an eye on him, and he was fine. But what we didn't know is that, as you know, you've got to constantly keep an eye on people. So then he went back online. Most probably, I don't know the full details, went back online into the dark web, into the chat rooms, where individuals there started to manipulate him, started to use that emotional dawah. And when I went to Saudi and I did a course on this, looking at their particular, they call this the humiliation process. They call this the process, and what they do is that they slowly destroy you. They slowly make you feel completely humiliated and degraded and feel that you have no hope, and then they say, we will give you hope. And then they build you back up. It's called grooming. It's a type of grooming process that finds out exactly what button to press, and you are manipulated and then exploited in terms of doing this. So what we learned then, he's 17 years of age. So he tells his mum and dad a story. And this is the craziness of it. Mum and dad buy the story. He says, Mum, Dad, I want to go to Turkey, Syria to do charity work. And Mum said, oh, Mum, Dad, they didn't check which charity. Not that most charities wouldn't take someone who's 17 years of age anyway. The risk assessment is too high. There's too much risk associated with it. They didn't ask, who's your handler, who's your emir, let us talk to him. They said, fine, son. They bought him a ticket to Turkey, to, I think it's to Bodrum, one of the results, from Bradford Airport, less than £70. Then he called them, as soon as he's in Syria, he said, I'm over now the border, I'm with ISIS, I'm going to go and fight. And it's a terrible thing, I do not wish it on any parents when your whole world falls apart like this. Because, and then, I was consulting with Brother Abdul Qadir, who many of you know, who was there at the time, and said, can we find this boy? Can we try find him? And let me tell you, if ISIS get their hands on a boy like this, they are never going to let him send him back. And that's what we're seeing now, that there are many people who have seen the reality of this criminal organization, seen that they are nothing but murderers and thugs, and they are being used. And what's happened to these individuals? They've been executed, they've been killed to send out a message to everyone else. Don't. And they do it all under an Islamic kind of, that these people are zindiq, they have rebelled against us, and they've made treason against us. They try to Islamically justify everything that they do. So we asked, can we find this boy? He said, no way you're ever going to find this boy. This group have an asset. That's all you are to them, an asset. And they will keep on manipulating you with the ayat, you're going to go to paradise, you're going to go to paradise, all of this. And you're fighting for what? What is the objective? This is the thing, you even have to ask, what is the objective of this organization? What are they trying to achieve in Syria? Doesn't seem to be any clear objective. And if there's fitna and confusion, the youth, you should completely run away from this situation. And tragically, this is a boy who's prepared to kill himself. That's an asset for that organization. So they'll put him straight line there. And he thinks he's doing this fi sabilillah. But he doesn't realize, one of the things I always say is that you do not know the political agenda of the organization that you are with. And if you don't know what their political agenda is, and you don't know what their maqsad and objective, then what are you doing risking the most important thing you have, your life, in relation, into this organization? Now, just tell you how bad it gets. So, Abdul Qadir said, tell them he's dead. That's it. And they'll never see him again. I said, I can't tell the parents that. How can you? So, we try to reassure them, but he hasn't turned up, nor has there been any kind of news from him at all. It gets worse because then the father thought, obviously, I had radicalized him. I'm the one who sent him there because I was talking to him about not going. So he sends counter-terrorism police to come and see me, who then came to interview me and say, all right, to find out if I'm responsible. And I was very annoyed with counter-terrorism police for that. Put them straight, and they were very apologetic afterwards. But the point here is this, that the two risks are obviously the risk of being involved in this criminal group, and then the second risk is this, the Terrorism Act 2006 and the Terrorism Act 2000, which, brothers and sisters, I want you to be clear, is an entrapment tool. Anyone in this room probably has broken this law. That doesn't mean you go run home now and start to chuckle. In fact, actually, I'll tell you a story. I had a Schedule 7 stop in 2008. Schedule 7 stop is when you go through a port or border control, you're allowed to be detained for 2 days so they can take your DNA. So my DNA was taken. Maybe because I'm involved in Islamic work, they wanted my DNA, and now my DNA is on the database. And they told me, they said to me, we've got your DNA now, so you better not mess around. That's what they said to me. Because this is the civil liberties that have been taken away. And the more individuals do these lone wolf type attacks, these foolish individuals who have no concept of maslaha and mafsada, no concept of benefit and harm. Whenever you do an incident here in the UK, what does it do except mean that all of our civil liberties are taken away, that Muslim charities are scrutinized. And let me tell you, mosques are now more and more increasingly being refused planning permission. And they will restrict and close our space down even more. And many of the du'at, they can't even go to university campuses and speak anymore. So this is how, the foolishness of these particular incidents. Now, so they sent the police on to me to investigate me and whether I was responsible, all this kind of thing. But on the serious point, the 2000 Act Terrorism Act, let me just take you through it. The antidote. Number one, Section 1, encouragement of terrorism. Number 2, dissemination of terrorist publications. Now, when it says dissemination of terrorist publications, anyone who downloads O'Lucky's magazine, Inspire, and then prints it off and gives it to someone else, has not only, this is the main offences are what we call Section 58, a section collection of information, okay, that is conducive towards promoting terrorism. You not only have you collected information, but you've also disseminated it. If you download it onto your phone and you take it from your phone and you Bluetooth it to someone else, you've disseminated that information. You are in breach of the Terrorist Act 2006, which carries a sentence of 10 years. 10 years. And over 1,000 people have been charged under the Terrorist Act 2006 since 2005, after the 7/7 attack. Over 1,000 individuals. Most of them, 90% of them, have been for lesser offences. And they carry the 8 to 10 years, i.e., and Section 6 is another one. Okay, attending a training camp or attending a place of training. That includes here in the UK, something as simple as going out to the Brecon Beacons or to the Lake District or anywhere else. If they deem that you are there for terrorist training, then you are in breach. Now, this act, okay, you know, I can't go through all the details of it. It's important. This is an entrapment tool. Many people, okay, when and if they choose to use this law to entrap you, they can entrap you. They can trap me. So after I had my Schedule 7 stop, I ran home because I had a big library of all the material I would collect, my resource library, and I destroyed my whole resource library because I thought they're gonna come and check my material, etc., etc. But that's how stupid this situation has become. As people who genuinely, and then people know I research extensively in this particular area. But even still, you know, the nature of the situation is still that, you know, you want to just think, okay, I don't want to be on remand for 6 months while they decide whether I'm a genuine researcher or whether I'm someone who's promoting or disseminating this. So in both of these are risks. There's risks to be involved, and there's risks to be even in the space. Now, some people say, oh, you're trying to silence everyone from challenging the oppression and the dhulm, which is taken. No. I want to create safe spaces like this where we all come together, we have questions, answers with people of knowledge, with understanding, people of wisdom, who can give us the correct guidance in relation to this particular matter. Because this is the challenge. The Muslim youth, as I said, there are many risks and vulnerabilities at the moment. We have this, they are being preyed on. If they're not preyed on and being by people trying to make them into extremists, and again, look at another one of the compelling things here in Birmingham. You know, because it's interesting, you find the profile falls into what I call the idealists, the fantasists, who live in this little bubble where they think they're going to go on this romantic jihad, and then they go to the reality of it and it's something different. And obviously the jihadi brides, the girls who are going over as well, some as young as 15 and 16 years of age. It just goes to show you the vulnerability that these girls have, and they are children. Essentially, they are children. Now, on the other side, we have what we call the sociopaths. These are people who don't have a moral compass, they're involved in violence and criminality, have a history of violence and criminality, and we see this kind of classification of people there as well. So to give you an example, I've met many people, they say, oh, I want to go to Syria. I said, why do you want to go to Syria? He said, you know what, you know, this is kind of like gangster, drug dealer type profile, no prayer, no salah, no ibadah, you know what, and they'll say, because I've been a really bad person, and if I go there, Allah will forgive me for everything. That in itself is a vulnerability. Because the people on the other side, what they're saying, come here. If you listen to us in a bit, Allah will forgive you of all of your sins. And you'll be in the soul of a bird, which is going to be flying around. And some people obviously, yeah, and the Houris and everything, for there you're in paradise. It's the same vulnerable mindset that will feed, that they are looking to exploit. And the reason they're doing is that because they know exactly, this is now about what we call disconnect. We're disconnected from the shabab. You know, you're disconnected about what's going on a Saturday night here in Birmingham. You're not. We're living in our little bubble sometimes. You don't know the reality of what's going on the street. Go and walk the streets. In fact, night patrol. You know, you remember the talk of Umar ibn Khattab? I talk about night patrol. Go out there and look what is going on in your streets. And you'll see all those 5 issues that I'm talking about, where you will see all of them manifest, strongly manifest out there, all that evil out there. And we are not connecting with the shabab. In fact, the drug dealers, the pimps, the criminals, the extremists, they're out there because they want to call them. They're making da'wah and they're calling them towards themselves. And we are away from that particular space. So this is what I call the lack of pastoral support, which is in our community. We're not out there connecting and engaging our young people. Okay. What I want to do is move on because I think time is kind of short. And this is a bit of a long paper that I've written. It talks about first, and I'm going to go through some of the influencer and the factors now, and there's many, many of them, but just to give you an idea of some of the reasons why, obviously, the shabab, they are being kind of groomed and driven in this particular way. One of the things, obviously, as I said, is that they are compelled by this argument around foreign policy. And of course, this foreign policy, I can't trivialize it. The war on terror is a very difficult thing. It's made it easy to recruit towards the extremist ideology. But I want to go back a few steps to that very first story, when Dhul Khuwaisira challenged the Prophet ﷺ. Is it a deficiency in his aqidah, or was it the foreign policy context? What was going on there? There was no other agreement. Can you see the Khawarij? They used the foreign policy context to promote their own ideology. In the time of Dhul Khuwaisara, when he challenged the Prophet ﷺ, the Muslims were in a position of ascendance. They were not being oppressed. So you couldn't blame an external factor. Can you see the point? And this is not from the way of Islam. Look at the way of Islam. If you help in the way of Allah, Allah will help you, make you strong. The verse, Allah does not change the condition of people until they change their own nafs. And when there's the fitan, when there is the trouble, Allah says, Qul huwa min indi anfusikum. Say it's from your own self. So the Muslim, when we have fitna, and this is also from the verse in the Quran, فَلْيَحْذُرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِ أَنْ تُصِيبُهُمْ فِتْنَةٌ أَوْ يُصِيبُهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَلِيمٌ. Let those beware who oppose the amr of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the command. As fitna will come upon them. This fitna is kufr, and they will suffer great punishment. So the reason for the adhab upon the Muslimin is not US and UK foreign policy. This is a means by which the punishment has been applied. The fundamental, as we know, weakness is our own selves and our abandonment of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We do not externalize it, we internalize it. So in the time of Dhul Khuwaisara, when he challenged the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he couldn't blame an external factor. It was his own deficiency in Aqidah. And what is that deficiency in Aqidah? He thought his knowledge and understanding and justice was superior than that of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So even when we have the mention of US and UK foreign policy today and drone attacks, and we should talk about these issues because drone attacks is something unacceptable. It's murder, it's indiscriminate murder, and this enrages me and it should enrage every person out there. But we're not going to get the help of Allah except through the way that Allah Ta'ala has prescribed. There's a very good story and it relates to the shabab and the condition today, and it's the story of Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah from the Tabi'een. As we know, he was an imam in the first generation after the companions. He learned from the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And he described himself as a youth walking in the apartment of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina and touching its ceiling. So this is Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah. Many of you are familiar with him. And a group of shabab, they come up to Hasan al-Basri and they say to Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, they said, give us a fatwa so that we can fight against al-Hajjaj. And al-Hajjaj was a tyrant at the time, a zalim and a tyrant at the time. And, just to show you the tyranny of Al-Hajjaj, he killed Abdullah ibn Zubair in the Haram, radiallahu an. So that's a companion. He killed the companions of the Prophet. So, Hasan al-Basri, he said to the youth, he says, if this is the punishment of Allah, then no sword will remove the punishment of Allah. And if it is the test of Allah, then have sabr with the test of Allah. So this is what he said. He said that the adhab of Allah did not come upon us because we were weak in yielding the sword. No, that's not why the punishment is. Because we are weak in terms of iman and taqwa. So he said, if it is the punishment of Allah, then have sabr. What did the shabab say? Shabab said, oh, you're an old man, you're a fool. And this is again one of the things which influences it. The Dar al-Harb, groups, what they use is this idea that the Muslim leadership are passive. They are cowards. We have the shuja. We have the bravery. We are the brave ones. They are just hiding behind words and hiding behind things like this because they're scared to fight. This is again, can you see the mindset that this influences? Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah is not scared to fight. Rather, a person of knowledge who learned from the companions knows the problem and knows the solution. Whereas the shabab, as I said, they're still in primary school. So what did happen is that the shabab, they said, oh, you're an old man, you're a coward, etc., etc. They all went and fought, and Hasan said they all went and fought, and every single one of them was killed. He said no benefit came from them. They acted just like a man does when a thief comes into the home. You react. You go straight for the sword. That's what when there's a thief in the house, you go straight for the sword. You react. The Muslim doesn't react. We examine the situation and we choose the best course of action based upon our principles. This is the way that Muslims act. We do not have a reactive mindset. Now, when you are blind and idealist, you have a reactive mindset. And that's why you're easily manipulated and led by other people. Now, going back onto this situation, Hasan al-Basri said no benefit came from them. And now I'm going to say quite a point which is quite challenging and quite controversial, and this is Okay, my own opinion, but it's based on kind of examination. If we look at the last 20 years, if you look at the last 20 years of jihadi interventions across the Muslim world and globally, 20 years, and we look at the benefit from this and the harm from this, then you will see, and I've got to say, that there has been virtually very little benefit at all from this methodology. Or rather, the parallel for us should be what the parallel is of Sulh Hudaybiyah. You see, the Prophet ﷺ, yes, fought battles against Al-Quraysh and the Mushrikeen. And then when peace was offered to him in the 6th year of the Medina period, peace is offered to the Prophet ﷺ. And the treaty itself was an unfavorable treaty. Unfavorable. Yet he agreed to the conditions of it. Allah Ta'ala called it Fathum Mubin in the Quran. Many of the companions, they were unhappy with this. Now, in the 2 years, the 6th year to the 8th year of the Medina period, more people became Muslim in that 2-year period of stability than the whole of the history of Islam before that. And then they went in the 8th year of the Medina period. The Prophet ﷺ came with an army of 10,000 to Mecca for the conquest of Mecca. Now, the wisdom of Sulh Hudaybiyah is exactly this. That when you have an environment where there is stability for the Muslims, not the complete instability and chaos that we have in the Muslim, this is the foundation in which you can establish the tarbiyah and the tasfiyah, the correct religious understanding, cultivation and development upon this. Anyway, this is a side point. I just want to go back now onto this. Okay, go through some of the points because there's so many, here is barriers to leaving. When someone's in the group, it's hard to leave the group because you are going to be outcast. You lose your identity. And one of the main reasons I find people entering into the groups is because of what we call belonging. The group is like a family. Many people are running away from their existing family. They say, my family doesn't understand me. But these brothers, they understand me. Belonging is a very, very powerful thing which keeps people attached to the groups. Now, what I found is that the influences, internal, emotional well-being. Many of the people who are young, who are influenced by this, have got emotional well-being, mental health issues. Some have addiction problems. Some have what you call low self-esteem, low confidence. Some are socially. I'll give you one example. The boy that I did an expert witness report for, how come he was so easy to manipulate? Because when I did his assessment, he had a learning disability. So he wasn't able to comprehend. And that was part of the vulnerability that he had. So there are many emotional factors. And I'll give you an example. Even the 2 Michaels who were responsible for the Lee Rigby killing. If you look at these 2 individuals, you can see that this is what we call sociopathic, psychotic. This is not normal. Normal people don't do these things. Normal people don't behave in this way. And we know that there was a history of drug abuse. We know there's a history of trauma. And that there was a history of sexual assault on one of them as well. So we know that there were deep traumatic issues with these individuals. Number 2, social exclusion. This is the point that many individuals who live are completely insulated and don't live with any exposure to anything apart from limited influences. One of the things that most jihadi extremist groups do is this. The extremist ones, okay, what they do is that they will completely isolate you from any other external influence. And they will also deliberately prevent you from gaining any Islamic understanding except from their own sources, except from their own people. And they will only give you certain books to read and certain kind of narratives to adopt. They will prevent you from speaking. And then when you do expose yourself to other knowledge sources, they will discredit those other knowledge sources. So what that does is it creates a completely insulated and limited exposure in terms of. Number 3 factor is what we call injustice and grievance. There's Islamophobia, there's racism. People feel that they have had dhulm done to them. So that's what we call a grievance complex. And this is also one of the reasons that ISIS were able to gain some kind of prevalence in Iraq, because as we know, there was a lot of persecution of the Sunni and there was lots of tribal conflict. So they were able to use that tribal conflict and gain support through those. So the point is that when someone is driven by grievance, that I am involved in this activity, why? Because I'm fighting to restore my izzah, or someone has oppressed them. This is not fi sabilillah. This is not for the sake of Allah. Then there was all the foreign policy factors. Of course, the external factors. When you have this mindset where you are emotionally vulnerable, you feel that you are excluded in society, and thirdly, where you feel that you have had wrong done to you and you perceive yourself as a victim of injustice and grievance. This is what we call disaffected paradigm. This is an individual who is very open to anything. Next, you see what's going on in Palestine, in Gaza. What we see, what's happening in Al-Aqsa at the moment, where Allah Ta'ala sends His nusra upon the people of Palestine and remove the dhulm upon the mustad'ifeen, the people who are being oppressed. We see this, of course it makes us angry. Drone attacks, 2 million people. Now when you are frustrated, angry, and you are exposed to this, and no one engages you, guess what? Certain people turn and said, we have the solution. We have the way. And this is where individuals have become what we call very easy pickings. I'm just going to go through a few more of the points, inshallah, and then everyone go home, inshallah. Okay, some of the sub-factors, like I said, there are 66. I'll go for 66. Part of the methodology of ISIS and these groups are what they call the end justifies the means methodology. This has got nothing, no basis in the Sharia. Even they say it themselves, that what they say is that because the maqsad is a good maqsad, objective, then we can use this mean. A haram means to kind of achieve this. This is actually taken from someone called Niccolo Machiavelli. This is the methodology of Machiavelli, by any means necessary, that the end justifies the means. You can do what you want to achieve your particular objective. So they know suicide bombing is haram. But they say because it achieves our maqsad, then they permit themselves to do it. So again, we go back to that parallel with Zionism. Are they driven by Sharia principles or are they driven by secular principles? Look what Allah says in the Quran. لا تستوي حسنات وسيئة ادفع بالتي هي أحسن. The good deed and the evil deed have no equivalence. So what this means is that if someone does wrong to you, you can't do wrong back to them, even though the end justifies the means. So if someone does wrong to you, as Allah says, ادفع بالتي هي أحسن. Repel them with a deed which is better. Someone does evil to us, we have to do good, that which is good back to them. We have to be morally superior all the time. This is a theological principle, where we realize that Allah Ta'ala is the one who has the control of all affairs. Whereas the secular principle is, if you do wrong to me, I will do wrong back to you. And so this is so that's 66. Number, like I said, 24, exposure to jihadist videos. So what we find is, this is where now we find that we call the immersion. When you take an individual and they are non-stop looking at this pornographic material, it's pornographic, beheadings, killings, and it's deeply unsettling and traumatizing material, and they become desensitized to this material. And then you have someone who is giving you a narrative according to it. Then this is a very powerful way of psychologically, obviously, controlling an individual. Number 22, family relationships, in particular relationship with the father. In 90% of the cases that I've worked with, most of the individuals that I work with have a terrible relationship with the father. They are disconnected from the father. They don't talk to their father at all. They don't respect him. They don't see him as even, sometimes it's because the father is not practicing maybe. Many times it's because the father doesn't know how to speak to his son about his feelings, and they haven't done any activities together as a bonding. So guess who becomes their new father? And this is a surrogate father. In fact, the people who try to manipulate them play this fatherly role. They say, we will help you do this, we will help you get married, we'll help you get a house. And by that, they have this general kind of control. Number 34, the rejection of the Islamic mainstream. You find that they will shut themselves away completely. And they do not recognize any of the mainstream Islamic authorities. They do not recognize the Jama'ah of the ulama, of Ahl Sunnah, who have a consensus and an ijma upon these things as well. Feelings of being rejected by society. Many of the individuals have personal experiences where they've been rejected, they've been cast out, that they have anger, therefore, towards the mainstream and non-Muslims who they see that have done for this, and as a result of that, then they easily fall, this grievance mentality falls into kind of supporting this kind of thing. Two more, inshallah, we call it Islamic education, as I've touched upon. If you look at the level of Islamic education, we find the Islamic education is very, very weak. And their theological principles are, so we need to build what we call theological resilience. And one of the simplest things I say to all the shabab here is one of the simplest principles is that when someone is teaching you or instructing you, make sure they have some kind of ijazah, they have some kind of permission, that what they say is actually based upon the Quran and Sunnah, especially when it comes to fatwa regarding al-waqiyah, the events and situations that are taking place around us at the moment. Okay, these are, the important kind of things. Just a story to give you an indication. One of my ustads, he taught me the story. It's a really good way of kind of explaining. There's a brother, you go up to him and you say to this, Ya akhi, can you teach me the masla of how to make masa over my jarab, over my sock? Can you teach me this? I don't know it. And the brother starts scratching his head. He goes, I don't know, go and ask the imam. Okay. Now obviously, making masa of kufayn wa jarabain, this is from, you should know this because this is from the matters of wudu. So this brother, he doesn't know what is from usul ad-din, fundamentals of a religion. Then you see this same brother, he doesn't know this simple masla, but regarding al-waqiyah, he says this ruler is a kafir, and this land is a land where we should do this, and these people are all zindiq, and this place is a person, these people are all batil, and this person is government. So regarding the matters which concern the whole ummah, the matters of the waqiyah, he's so opinionated and gives fatwa freely. When it comes to the matter of the masla of the masa over the kufayn wa jarabain, he doesn't even know this. And so this shows the kind of universality of this and the basic lack of Islamic education. And it's not Islamic education based upon tarbiyah, upon usul and ulum, but it's just based upon slogans. Converts to Islam. Converts to Islam are easy pickings for many of these groups. In particular, what we found is that when the work that we were doing in South London with a lot of our brothers coming out of prison, in prison that they would be targeted, convert in prison, and many of them would then be influenced by the Dar al-Harb methodology. Because what Dar al-Harb was saying is this: when you go back out, you are a Muslim, but you can still rob and steal and have a girlfriend. And that's very compelling. It's quite attractive for an individual who wants to be a Muslim, and he doesn't know. He has an excuse for his ignorance. He just comes straight into Islam. He doesn't know you. Oh, and you're a person, like I said, the first thing, they look like us, they speak like us, they use the same. And they're saying to him, you know what, you can rob, you can steal, just got to do it for, just put some fi sabilillah, and you can have a girlfriend because you're allowed to have, in taqiyah, in the land of war, there's a land of war where it's permitted for you to take girls as you want. This is a very attractive proposition for a convert. So when someone converts to Islam, it's very important that we make sure that they have the right people from the mainstream of Islam, from Ahl Sunnah, who teaches them correctly, because this is a completely open book. If you look at the story of Nicky Riley, who was a convert with learning disabilities in Exeter, again, he was online, he went online, people told him how to make this very amateur nail bomb. He went into a restaurant in Exeter and tried to blow it up, but when he went into the toilet, he ended up blowing it up on himself. You might remember this story many years ago. That shows you the vulnerability of one who is a convert to Islam. And and then the last point I want to make is around foreign policy, although there's many others. The last point is around foreign policy is this: just as our shabab are ignorant when it comes to the theological principles at primary level, in the same way, when we talk about Syria, we are talking about very complex geopolitical situations, whereas the groups offer you a simple black and white solution. Simple solution. We go and fight, we kill them. We are talking about very complex issues. Even when you look at the Arab-Israeli conflict, you look at the Palestine situation, I even say to people, sit down, try to solve the situation. You can sit it with these are very complex geopolitical situations. And you have shabab who don't even have a basic concept of geopolitics, leave alone around international affairs, leave alone the world, that are so easily, yet they are opinionated that this is the correct understanding. Actually, there's a final one, actually, which is actually very significant in this whole point. Why is it the shabab are going up? And this is my main thesis at the moment. It's called the crisis of masculinity. That young men today think what it means to be a rijal, a man, is to be tough, is violence, is power, is control. And this is what they think is the embodiment of manhood and chivalry. And that's why you see them. They're all fake wannabe plastic jihadis out there. You see the first thing they want to do is get their gun and their pose. They have to have this particular... Because they're just boys who want to play with toys. That's it. This is how they see it. It's an abstract world. I know people might think I'm being a bit harsh here, but this is a fundamental failure and weakness. Why? Because, and I have to say this, because we used to teach that the only way, I mean, if I go back now 20 years in the 90s, and talks I did, I said the only way to really be a man is to fight jihad. This was a mistake. It was an absolute mistake. Because the Prophet ﷺ is the embodiment of manhood, what it means to be a rijal. And Allah says, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. He came as nothing other than a mercy to all the world. And is totally balanced in all the characteristics of what it means to be masculine. So we have, unfortunately, this crisis of masculinity. And in the video presentation, I'll show you, even ISIS use this. In all of these images that they have, where they're all standing there in their guns, they've actually taken this from Expendables 3. They've taken it totally out of Hollywood. And they're pandering to the same, what they call Call of Duty, Medal of Honor, video game type of psyche, in terms of how they connect with the young people. Inshallah, I hope it's been some benefit, inshallah, for the talk. I know there's a lot of content there. Inshallah, really, this is something which, as an event, I think maybe is a workshop, really maybe need at least 2 hours or a bit longer. So brothers, Jazakallah khair, sisters, for your patience, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala truly to make us individuals who are shuhada al-nas, witnesses for the truth. And we ask us to enable us to have the means to go out there and educate our shabab correctly. And we ask Allah ta'ala truly to guide our shabab, our children. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, to make them لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Ameen. Inshallah, if there's any questions or comments or corrections, inshallah, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم